Welcome back to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And we are going to continue talking about the book Right Away and All at Once. And we're talking about step or section 4, which is build a team. Build a team and clean house if necessary, right? And this one I thought was like one of the more serious in tone chapters so far. Did you guys kind of get that sense too?
I think because it was about people, it's about personnel. It's not about money or financial decisions. It's about your team.
Yeah.
Well, that and I think this flopping back between personal and this chapter 100% was a business chapter, right?
Yeah.
There was no personal part to it. So it's like you just went through this whole thing about giving and like the personal and like how you're
Helping.
managing. And then this is like, okay, We're just like hard stop. We're going right back to business lesson 4 or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's personal in nature, right? Because it's evaluating in any given circumstance, like the team of people trying to accomplish something.
Yeah.
And I also thought that it was just very like more direct.
It was like matter of fact.
Yeah.
It was like, this is if A, then B.
Well, and maybe more personable, not personable, but personal in some way, because, in each of our different capacities, we've been going through some of these things, right? And I don't know, it was for me a little bit of like I said it before we even started recording, like a little bit of a gut check, right? So,
and I think like this chapter, the guy is a hedge fund, right? That's what his like this. If any chapter so far has like epitomized the way that group of companies operate, this was probably the most honest.
But it's probably also the one that is most necessary. I don't want to make it more important, but in other words, like it is very hard. Like the book is about a turnaround, right? The book is about either taking a company that's satisfactorily underperforming and exploding their efficiency, their profitability, everything, or about turning around a company who's starting to fail or is failing, And so in that sense, it is necessary. You know what I mean? Like the reality is you have to take a hard look at the people on your team and, whether you use the thing about, basically, are we all rowing in the same direction? That's not what you say. There's a different saying that you use, but you know what I mean? Like we have to be in step. Like we have to be going the same direction, and we have to have faith that the other person can do the job that they're responsible for, and that's part of it. Part of it is the clean house thing. Everybody thinks is obvious, like just get rid of people. But part of it is identify what needs you have and what skills you have,
right?
And then align those and have the people doing the thing that they're most capable of, which may create another hole on your team, but at least then it fills the voids that you have. You can fill some of the voids more capably.
Yep, for sure. He starts off the chapter talking about getting the right people around you. He used the term board, right? And I think for certain organizations, certain size groups, board makes sense. Right? You've got to have a governing board. You've got to have people with a variety of experience that can kind of be those checks and balances, kind of be the mentors, right? He talked about a mentoring experience that he had. And I thought it was useful. And I thought maybe even not specifically applicable from like a quote unquote board perspective in our organization or the stuff that we're involved in here or personally otherwise. But I did think about it from the perspective of like building the team around you with that variety of voices and experiences in a way that gets you the answers that you need, right? Which I thought was interesting, was valuable.
Yeah, and there's a term for, I think he's a old psychologist, and it's called the Gestalt theory. So it just means that you get the total picture, not a partial picture. And I know for me, that's really important with Berg. In other words, regardless of where Brian ends up, you know what I mean? Whether Brian's sitting one office away or a window separates us or there's 5 miles between us or he's in a different state, I will act in as close to the same way that we originally did it when we realized that it could work, which is I'm going to need your opinion on certain things just because I know it's not my opinion.
Yeah.
Like I know going into it, you're going to disagree. I don't want to say disagree. I know you're going to give me a different view that I hadn't considered. Right.
Sure.
And so that's really important because you could blindly run right into the middle of the ocean accidentally and drown yourself, because if everybody just keeps agreeing with you and you keep making the same decision pattern and nobody checks that pattern, so for me, that's really important. I use Ford the same way. And we're developing a team around us that each of us that has other people who do that in the way that it used to just be the three of us.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I got from this chapter is when I read it, looking at, okay, let's look at the team and say, okay, what is the best benefit to the person as a person and as for the company, and do we have a place for him there or her there that we can use them and take advantage of those skills? And if we do, then what other problem does it now create? And try and identify like a sense of urgency, in the old Eisenhower matrix that I like. What's important, what's urgent, and then try and fill the voids as necessary.
Yeah.
Well, and we actually have you guys have interacted with an advisory board. They don't have fiscal responsibility, but they provide insight. And a new board member came on this spring. There's another one retired. And it was so interesting because this person is process. Like this is their love language, we'll call it, basically. I mean, they're just like, I don't know. I've heard through the grapevine that they have like a 6-page like process for like one person, just how things are supposed to be done. I mean, they just like to have everything down. And, at their first board meeting, they came up with a lot of interesting ideas. And again, it was the same thing. It was that like, it was just a different perspective that like, that isn't my strength. That isn't what I'm like. Mm-hmm. I'm not the process guy. And so having someone that like, hey, what about this? Or what did you do about here? What about this? I was like, I don't know. We just did it. Like, that's how we've always done things. So having that different perspective, because, the first board members were all owners or executives. And so they were all had some similar, they had a lot more experience, but they also had probably similar tendencies.
Okay.
And so with bringing on this new board member, it kind of like just shook it up a little bit and gave it a little different vibe, just so that you can kind of get that other perspective that you might not get, and what's this, you guys are all about the saying, but iron sharpens iron, right? Like we're not talking about yelling or like screaming matches, but like disagreements are healthy. It's just, once a decision has been made, the person that disagreed, that's the tough part, is being able to go like, okay, I voiced my opinion. They chose to go in a different route. So now I have to support that route versus like holding on to, well, I was right, or whatever the scenario might be. That usually it's a personal, like people like to do that. I mean, that's life. I mean, everyone loves to tell you so, or I told you so, or whatever the scenario is. So it always is that thing of like, okay, now, there was a meeting the other week I had, and I was on a conference call with people, and I brought something up, and the rest of the group was like, oh, well, we don't find that important. And that was perfectly fine. I voiced my thing. I brought it up. They chose not to. Now I follow along. It's not really like, but I mean, that's like a conscious decision to be like, okay, I put it out there. We either discussed it or didn't discuss it or whatever the scenario is, but you have to kind of go along with the group once a decision has been made.
Yeah. I think that's tough. I think it's tough as a human,
right?
Because I think there's a tendency, like when you've got a thing in your head, your mind, your experience tells you is the right way to do something, and another group of individuals say, we've heard you and we're not going to do that. Like, I think that it can be like deflating or dejecting, to the individual at times, because they feel like they've been disregarded. But I always find this interesting, especially in places where there is that like organizational structure, group structure. And we love to talk about sports, right? So there's something that Peter Milliman, I've said it on this podcast probably 3 times in the last 3 episodes. Something Peter Milliman, the head coach at Johns Hopkins, says, it doesn't make the boat go faster. And when he's talking about it doesn't make the boat go faster, he's saying like organizationally, this thing sits above all of us, right? So if you say like, what are the hierarchies of needs? It's got to be, organization, and then maybe team inside of organization, and then maybe individual inside of team, right? And if the individual doesn't buy into what the team's trying to accomplish, whether or not their opinion is the one that we chose, or if the team doesn't buy into what the organization is trying to accomplish, whether or not their thought, their process was the one we chose, like that all has to go up. Otherwise, the organization, the boat, doesn't go faster. And that's tough, right? To be the one on a team or the one in an organization or the team inside of a larger group that, we thought we had this really cool idea, this really great idea. We were going to change the world. And the organization said, that's not the direction that we're headed, or that doesn't make us as a whole go faster. That can be difficult, I think. So.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about this a while ago on one of the podcasts about when I was at, there was a Navy SEAL exercise training thing that Bill Witt did years ago. Mm-hmm. And as soon as
Echelon? No.
Yeah. So Echelon Front. Yeah. So as soon as I did it, my dad was still alive at that point, but I heard my dad saying, that I'd be the first one killed if I was in the Army, because I can't take an order to save my soul. And it really made me take a hard look at how that affects me personally, but also professionally, and start to really try to ask more questions and get more feedback. Because generally, once I said okay, this is what we're going to do, you always say I'm good at being a bulldozer, right? Once someone gives me direction, I can go do that. And so you have to be careful then. I realized I had to establish that, okay, well, I need the input of these other people to make sure they're on board. Not just to make sure we're doing the right thing, but also to make sure they're empowered. How can I empower anybody? And so trying to merge the other side of some of the Navy SEAL stuff we did with, dynamic subordination and alpha switching and all that with that echelon front to say okay, it's all well and good to say the person who is the most qualified gets to make the decisions in any given case. But it is hard to yield control of something that you're supposed to be in control of, because you have to trust that person. And that's where the team becomes so important, that you have to be able to sit in a room when you're having a discussion, or sit on a job site when you're trying to decide, how you move forward with some impediment that's in your way that moment in a trench or on a dirt site, and be willing to say, okay, all 5 of us can have a discussion. We can come up with what we believe to be the best answer, and then all go forward with that answer. Right? Mm-hmm. That's difficult.
Yeah.
There's a lot of egos. There's a lot of, we try and stay away from titles and structure, but it plays in a feeling of entitlement, really, of saying well, no, wait a minute, this was my decision, and so walking that line, because you also end up, if there's 50 people able to make a decision, well, you may get no decision because it's just going to be complete discord. So somebody ultimately has to say, this is what we're doing.
I've been a part of several boards in different organizations, and I can't remember where this was, but there was a guy, I think, I know his last name, but his first name I think was Rick Caswell, I think. And I was young, a board member, and I thought oh man, these guys value my opinion. They've asked me to come do this thing, and it was a great experience, and I appreciated that they thought that I had something to add, and I remember it was a great learning experience for me personally too. I remember that one of the first times, I was the lonely vote no on a topic, right? 9 board members, 8 yeses, 1 no, and Rick was awesome. Rick, because he was hey, can we talk for a moment? And after everything had transpired, I said, yeah, no problem. And he's hey, I understand you had a difference of opinion here. I understand where you were coming from. And he said, I think it's important to know that when you decided to be part of the board, there are going to be times like this. But I also think it's maybe more important to realize that when we walk out of this room, we all had the same message, and we all had the same intention. It was to do the best thing we thought possible for the organization. And that was like it was good to have a mentor in that moment, because as a young person who thought I had been brought in because of a different environment, different experience, different set of skills. But to like be in that moment, think I had a valid point for why we shouldn't do something, and to be like the lonely vote to say no to something 8 other people were like, no, we're doing it. I thought that was like super crucial in like my own personal professional development, to say like we're still the same team. And like that, yeah, I think that's part of what the book speaks to in this chapter. Like, how do you, one, get everybody in a room, give them a voice, not be the overwhelming yes or no? How do you then take that information, filter it down to its go forward moment, and also not piss people off in at the first meeting or the first time they say no?
Yeah.
Right? Is that fair?
No, yeah, it's fair. And I mean,
that's a tough thing. Like I was on a board that I'm no longer on, and like their mindset was everybody always had to vote the same way.
Oh.
And in my mind, if you have an odd number, that's why the Supreme Court has an odd number. Like you can say no, leave it there. Like you put your voice out wherever you're supposed to be. And they're like, oh no, we like to have unison. And I'm like, well, then what's the point of it? Because like, back to my iron sharpens iron. Like if you're not going to have a discussion about something, it kind of feels irrelevant. And they're like, kind of pulled me aside because I did something like you did. I voted no. And but they weren't like, but they were just more like, oh no, we try and have like, everybody says yes at the same time. And I'm like,
they were like, I don't know. Why'd you be the sore thumb?
Yeah. And I'm sitting there going like that's in my perspective, like I'm cool with being the single no vote. Like it's going to happen whether I wanted it to or not. But it was just more that like, I was disillusioned because they weren't willing to have that discourse or difference of opinion. They just kind of wanted to be like, rubber stamping things. And I'm like, I'm a hard out on that. Cause like, when we have the advisory board meetings, like I want them to hit me with everything. I always tell, what's my saying about like, I can get a hug from my mama. I don't need a hug. Like I want you guys to hit me with everything every critical thing you can, because that's what helped me process the question or something like that. But I think then he goes into some other things in the chapter that are really cool. The focus one, and then the mood one, which is mood's kind of a weird word for it, but it's basically like mind space where you are,
right?
And how he uses those to really try and, and it was just funny because like the multitasking thing, like we all do it nowadays, so we're all expected to do it, right? Like we got to be doing like 42 different things at the same time, and like. You're having a conversation with somebody, you're checking your emails, you're doing, your phone's ringing or your watch is ringing or whatever the scenario is. And you're trying to manage all those things. And, he was really talking about that. Like, was it be here now? What was the saying?
Be present.
Be present now or something like that. And like how just like, okay, you know what? Like we can get this done, because there was actually that other podcast, Construction Genius.
Oh yeah.
Haven't listened to it in a while, but it popped on the other day. And this guy was talking about how the process in construction works now, where like you send an email to somebody about an issue on a job. It sits for 5 to 7 days. Then they respond. It's another 5 to 7 days, and all of a sudden, all this time, this problem is blooming. It's getting bigger. It's not like, this was more about like you have a problem on the job. So you call, and the two of you go out there, you talk it over. Maybe you send an email afterwards to like formalize what the decision was, but it was just about that whole thing of like, oh, well, I sent him an email. I haven't heard back from him. Like, like kind of that, he's saying a little bit of like an avoidance technique, but like, I did my part. I sent him an email and warned him, but like, I didn't really like follow up or like, I remember there used to be an app where like you could force a cell phone call to go to voicemail. Like years ago, there was like a slide dial, I think it was called or something, right? And you could like, I don't really want to talk to him. I just want to leave my voicemail. But like, I called you. I don't know why you didn't pick up and like deal with this type of thing. But it is really an interesting thing how, we're talking about, with you with the with the rowing on the boat faster, and like it is a little countercultural because everybody thinks it's about I at this point.
Sure.
And then this is a similar thing where like we're supposed to be, checking our Twitter to see what our elected officials are doing, getting our job done, responding to somebody else all at the same time, and we're not able to do that like
You just do
singular
everything
focus.
poorly.
Right.
Well,
Nothing is good.
And it so it did like it's not a conflict, right? But I was thinking about this with like where the book started with the work-life integration versus the task switching, multitasking, be here now,
Right.
and the difficulty that creates at times because we live in this world, this environment where we're sort of expected to be always available, always ready for the next question, especially depending on your situation, like maybe responsible for multiple groups, multiple people who, and you don't want to
Let anybody down.
You don't let them down. You don't want to stop work. You don't want to stop progress. And I think that like creates this sense of like, it's hard to be engaged in only one thing at a time because what about the rest of the things? And
So I apply it to a lot of things. And this is a piece that I remembered from the first time we read it and from, I think, Atomic Habits.
Okay.
Right. So like a combination of two things where I decided I would stop using my phone at places. Like I take very few pictures of like if we go skiing.
Mm-hmm.
I will take a couple pictures so that there's a picture for the girls someday if they want to see a picture of like, they show their kids a picture of it.
Yeah.
Right. But I try to be very present when I do that. And it got to it triggered other things. Like we have one of the sports cameras.
Sure.
Right. So it sounds counterproductive. It sounds counterintuitive that I would have that. I don't watch it. But if the girls wanted to watch it, they could watch it, but I'm not taping it. Right. So like I actually spent the money so that we don't have to feel obligated to take pictures or videos. Like if somebody wants to see the girls play, like one of our relatives, we could say, oh, sure, here's the link. You could see whatever you want to see. It doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean? It would be like you were there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a training tool. Like most people go over the top parent crazy and make it a training tool. We don't. I'm doing it so that neither Erin nor I feel obligated to take pictures. But I also don't post where I am. I don't post where I'm going for the most part.
Sure.
And it all relates back to this and Atomic Habits saying like you need to be present or else you're going to miss everything.
Yeah.
And I recently have tried to double down on that as we're going through the book. The whole point of the book was we were supposed to use it ourselves as, for Berg itself, as we formulated a go forward plan and all these things. And so I'm trying to work through that process. And one of the spaces it was really weird for me just this week was we restructured all of our meetings, right? So that they're smaller meetings, not necessarily shorter, but they're more group specific. And then once all the groups meet, then Scott and Brad and Dylan will meet with me and we'll go over anything that came out of those meetings. And I'm free to come or go to any of the meetings that I want to. They would like me to be engaged, but they don't need me to be engaged. So it was a really weird thing where I was like, feel like I should go to this meeting, but I would only go to the meeting because I feel obligated to go to the meeting, right? And it's a weird, not that I don't want to, that's not the point. The whole point is to let them do their job. Therefore, I can do the job that I'm actually tasked with doing instead of watching them do their job, which just diverts my attention from doing my job. And so it's really hard though, because if Ford said hey, what was going on with this? I was talking to Dylan and I heard this, there could have been a whole conversation that I have no idea happened because it hasn't gotten to me yet from the sense of my meeting that would give me the information. So it's really hard because there's this expectation that you want to be prepared. And I almost think that is the driver more than anything else, is the idea that everything has to be available at any moment, right? It may not be that you feel the need to answer the question, but rather for yourself, but rather that you feel that you need to answer the question if the appropriate person asks it. So that makes you have to try and have your hands in everything. And then we say, but everyone just do your individual job, do your task. I mean, we're all going to be involved. We're all going to hold hands the whole time. You're going to get nowhere. You know what I mean? If in the boat example, if we all held the same oar, we're not going anywhere.
Sure.
We have to, you know what I mean? If the three of us are in a boat, in a canoe, it would have to be a big canoe. if we all held the same paddle, we're not going anywhere.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I gotta trust
round.
that. Yeah. I mean, if you make it two people, if one person's paddling on the left and one person's paddling on the right, if you're constantly worried about the person on the left, you might as well tell them to stop paddling. You know what I mean? And that's in a funny story. I did that with Aaron. We were in a canoe and I gave up. I was like, I can't do this. Like you just sit there and enjoy the canoe. I'm going to paddle the boat by myself because this isn't working, because I was just micromanaging her paddling. Like, you're going to have to paddle faster because I'm paddling stronger. You know what I mean? It's a crazy example, but it's the truth. So I think that's part of the topic of this, be present and know the mood of the room and all those things, is to try and build a team that you can trust is doing the job they're supposed to do. And all of a sudden the boat goes faster. Mm-hmm. And you weren't not managing it, but you were letting each person do their piece. And if you know you have a hole in the process, that's okay, as long as you know the hole's there, because then everybody can sort of account for it and say, well, we're going to find the right piece to put in there. We're not just going to stick anybody in that hole because we have a hole. You know what I mean? It's almost better.
Well, and then the second one about the mood thing, which was interesting about, like, I don't think he got into the science of it, but like, if you're in a bad mental spot, you can't make good decisions, or your decisions will, like, whatever is interesting. He's like, and then there's different tiers to his system. And there was actually some interesting ones where the middle was actually good because you're like curious or whatever the scenario is. But he was like, go for a walk, whatever it is, like, get your head clear. Because, like, if you're clouded, and you think about it, like, our business, our industry runs stressful. I mean, everybody's industry does, I guess, to whatever, depending what you do.
Yeah, sure.
But our industry runs stressful. And if you're under and you can't see past it, making those decisions are even tougher because of the stress that you put on yourself for doing those things. And so it's interesting that how he was kind of putting that in there, as part of this chapter as well.
Yeah. And like that emotional response, right? If you let like the emotions of other things dictate how you respond to or behave in the next situation, like almost never can like good come from that, right? So I mean, we've talked about that a bunch. Like, you walk out of a stressful meeting or a difficult situation into a meeting where there could be noise, nuisance type behavior, and all of a sudden, like, little things that normally didn't matter become like just amplified.
And I think for me, it's really important, and I think the podcast is not a bad venue to share it, that like that impacts me personally. You know what I mean? Like, Brian, we're not going to get into the event, but the exact event that I'm talking about where you referenced that, and you weren't talking about me necessarily, right? Mm-hmm. But where I came out of a meeting that nobody realized, I came off of a call that I was aggravated. You know what I mean? And I was like, had nothing to do with the meeting that I was walking into. And I walked into the meeting and was triggered to make a decision that you and I had talked about, but I was going to like come up with a plan. We were going to have a process. We would agree on the timing. We'd decide how we'd move forward. We'd be completely prepared. And I threw us into chaos because I walked into a meeting and was not in the right mind space to deal with one thing that would have, any other day, I probably would have just come to you and be like, you got to hear this.
Yeah. Right.
But that day, that's not what I did. That day, I made a statement that then resulted in an immediate response being necessary and triggered a bunch of decisions that we had talked about, but not within the time frame we had talked about, and we weren't prepared. And it impacted both of us and other people on the team. And it was specifically because I wasn't able to manage where I was mentally at that point in that meeting. And so you got a reaction instead of a decision. Mm-hmm. And you got to be able to own that, because it's the only way you're going to learn. And I think the book does sort of hint at that not that they want it to happen, but if it happens, you got to realize it happens and then evaluate and say like, okay, how do we not do this again? And I think we ended up, in a similar situation a few weeks later, but I handled it different specifically because of that. And it wasn't as injurious to us necessarily.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But, whereas I feel like with you and I, and that's what I really like about our relationship, is sometimes my urgency spurns you on to say like, okay, I've thought about this, and you have 57 different variations of how it could go. You've thought of every option, but you're like waiting for just the right time. And whereas my thing is sort of like, there's not going to be a right time. Like, if you're comfortable, just make the decision and do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
There was one other thing in the chapter that was interesting. I'm trying to like.
What did you think
it.
about the like the IQ dipstick and the 10-hour plane ride, like those thoughts?
Well, that was the thing about the compensation plan at the end of the chapter, and like how different people at different job types, like, you know, a lot of our government requires us to provide exact same things to everyone. That's just a
sure.
fairness scenario. But he was saying how like different people value different things, and trying to meet them where they value it more than just the blanket stuff was kind of interesting to me, because we've had that in the past where like, you know, we think we're doing something good for everybody, but there is a group of people that doesn't provide value to.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're just like, I'd rather have, you know, something different. And, you know, we have a lot of legal issues as to why we can and can't do certain things in that manner. But at the same time, like there is times where it's like, you know, maybe we visualized it from our perspective, and maybe there was a different perspective that like didn't see the value that we were excited about, the value that we thought we were creating for the team, and it just didn't match up.
Yeah. And like, you're right. 'Cause sometimes you feel like you're making decisions for the entire group, where if you could be a little more customized with some of those options, you could kind of meet people where they're at.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and even we had a conversation again this week. We were talking about a different topic, and it was, we're trying to do what is best for the greater good. And I said to Brian, I said, the irony of this is it doesn't matter what you do. You could give the absolute best version of this thing, even better than we could afford to give, but the absolute best version. And a percentage of the people are still going to be upset because the product is not good, right? Like, and you know what I mean? That the reality of the situation is you can't give them what they want.
Right.
It's not possible. It will never happen. So then, not that you say like, okay, well then do we waste money here? But you know what I mean? But in other words, like, but we're putting all this effort and thought into how do we make this the best possible thing we can offer, when it doesn't actually matter, because no matter what we offer, it's not going to be received well. It's not going to be great. So do we direct all that attention and perhaps some of the money to somewhere that it would actually be impactful, and say like, hey, well, this is a good resource. You know what I mean? In other words, and it's hard to do that. You know what I mean? It's hard to look at it that way. But I was watching you struggle with it in the early stages of this decision. And I was just thinking, it's literally what came to my mind. It was like, Brian, it doesn't even matter, because no matter what you do, it's not going to be received well.
Yeah.
You know, we could feel really good about it, but they don't, you know, the team doesn't necessarily know the whole story.
Sure.
And they don't realize the limitations and the culpability and everything else. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
So maybe we direct our attention elsewhere.
Yeah. No, it's tough because you take that responsibility personally, right? You're trying to do
the best for the most, and the amount of time and effort spent on things that, occasionally in this scenario, the end result's not going to be the right response for some portion of the group. Yeah, that's tough. Well, that kind of almost circles back to, we've been here a while, but that almost circles back to the beginning with like the board and the vote of like, it's not, there's nothing that we can do that will ever meet everyone where they need to be.
Yeah.
But there's that trust factor that we're trying to do the best with whatever resources we have available to us. And if you have trust in that, then even if it doesn't match for you exactly, you understand the intent behind the thing.
Right.
If you don't understand the intent behind a thing or don't agree with it, then no matter what it is, you won't find any value in it just because your perspective is different.
Well, and Ford, you walked me almost right to where I wanted to be. What's the actual title of this chapter again, Brian?
Build a team.
And then?
Clean house if
necessary.
necessary.
House if necessary, right? So as we've talked through this thing, so much of what strikes me is I wanted it to be till the job's done, or whatever that saying was, right?
Right.
And like I like the old school sense of like you're just going to go to work and you're just going to grind, and then you're going to go home and you're going to enjoy your family and you're going to do these things, right? And I'm not a big like let's have a party and all hug. I'm not any of those things. You know what I mean?
Right.
I lean more towards the Tom Berg like Ford appreciates me 52 times a week. Like I don't need him to tell me I did a good job.
A year, just to be clear.
52 times a year. Sorry about that. 52 weeks a year is what I meant to say. 52 times a week. That would be a lot.
That's a lot of appreciation.
That's way more than any of us could tolerate. But you know, that sense of believing that the team is doing the best for you is where the culture thing comes from. It's not about having pinball machines and having parties and all, you know, hugging and rainbows and sun. That's not what it's about. It's about that you believe that the rest of the team has the same values, the same end goal, the same mindset as you. And if it all aligns, then that's great. But if it doesn't, that's when you have to clean house. Like in other words, and not clean the whole house, but in other words, that's in my mind, what makes you have to move on from people. Most of the people that aren't necessarily a part of the team anymore, there was something that led us to not feel like they were pulling in the same direction. They were not helping the boat go faster.
Well, I think, and it's like, it can be mutual at times, right? There are a lot of people who left because it wasn't our decision. It wasn't us not feeling like they were helping.
They weren't on the right boat. They were like, I don't want to be on this boat.
Yeah.
This isn't the boat for me. You know, and that's what I'm saying. So it's got to be mutual. And if it's mutual,
well, it's not always mutual. I guess mutual.
No, I mean when it's successful.
Right. Yeah,
it has to. It's
mutual positive, not neutral. Negative.
Yeah. I meant that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when the system works, and you have the right people in the right spots and on the right boat, and everything goes smooth, and all of a sudden, any decision you make, they would think, okay, they're trying to do the right thing. It may not benefit me in this specific thing, but there had to be something behind it. They give you the benefit of the doubt. Whereas if it's the opposite, and either whether they don't want to be on the boat or you don't think they're the right person on the boat, every decision you make is looked at from that angle to say like, well, this didn't benefit me. It probably benefits, you know, Ford or Dan or Brian or Bob or Joe or Tracy, whoever, you know? And so I think that's really a big part of this it's why culture has become such a driving factor in modern business, is because I don't know that people trust people anymore. So you have to sort of develop a team that has a level of trust.
Yeah. Yeah. That's in the book too. They got to trust each other and they got to work together.
Chapter 64 in 2035.
It'd be chapter 3, section 47. It's like this. I'm confused
I
by
don't
the
even know what
system.
chapter we're on anymore. So that's probably a good place to wrap it up. So thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope you got something from this, and we hope you come back for another episode.